we kick on. Hello, everyone, to this seminar. I'm very happy to introduce Dan Headley for you. Dan have a genuine background. He actually had answers to all my questions the other day when I chat with him. You have a genuine background. You've been a lecturer at the Oxford and Exeter. You've been at the FSA in UK, and have a genuine background as well from the investment management industry. And currently you hold a position as a director for public policy at Fidelity, right? Am I right? Yeah.
You are right.
Okay,
yes,
super. Super. Now it's really of great interest for us to listen to you, because we have had a discussion for a couple of years in Sweden about inducements. And last year we had a government, the government asked the supervisor for a report on how MiFID II and IDD were implemented in Sweden and the effects of those regulations. So we are really interested in your experiences from the UK market, and I know that you also have a great knowledge of the rest of Europe as well. So with that, I welcome you, and just some housekeeping rules before this. As you can see, this is a recorded seminar. We will not put it on public, but for your colleagues that missed this event, there will be a possibility to get a link from us. During the session, I think we will have a discussion for about an hour, if you're not answering all the questions right away then. Otherwise, we end at 10 o'clock Swedish time. If anyone wants to ask a question, it's okay. This is not, Dan doesn't have a presentation, right? So we can just interrupt you, you promised.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine.
So whenever. So please use the Q&A or raise hand or the chat functions, and I will keep an eye on that and transfer the questions to Dan. So with that, very welcome, Dan.
Thank you, and thank you for your very warm words of welcome, Frederick. As you said in your intro, I look after public policy at Fidelity. I've been doing that for 12 years. So I've got to know the company very well, and it's worth just saying straight off the bat that Fidelity kind of divides itself into two parts as a company. We conceive of ourselves as having a business that looks after portfolio management and fund manufacture and wholesale distribution. So that's what many people would think of as a traditional fund manager, wholesale distributor setup. But then we have a second part of our business that we call Workplace and Personal Financial Health, WPFH, quite a mouthful. But that organization operates three platforms where we sell Fidelity's funds, but also third-party funds on an equivalent and equal basis. One platform runs funds for DC pension schemes. Another one supports advisors that use the platform in giving advice to their end retail clients. And the third and final is a direct-to-customer online platform. So Fidelity effectively has skin in the game across a number of dimensions, both as a fund manufacturer and as a distributor of third-party and own funds. And as Frederick says, you know, being based in the UK, we've had experience of the Retail Distribution Review back in 2012 and seen the impact that has had on the UK advice network and fund manufacturers as a result back down the supply chain. But we also run platforms in Germany and across continental Europe, so we're keen observers of MiFID review and trying to get to understand where that might go. So you'll have to excuse me, I've got a bit of a cold this morning, so I'm a bit sniffly and deep of voice. And as Frederick said, I haven't provided any slides because some of the material I want to cover is both public and private. And to be perfectly honest, I couldn't remember which was which. So rather than commit it to a public slide, I kept it out. But Frederick can supply my email details after the event, and I'm very happy to respond to any questions you might have offline, as well as during this session. So thank you for having me.
That's great. So, but so it seems like, if we're just going back to the Fidelity business side, have you already sort of, now I'm jumping into the discussion right away, but you have this is quite recent that you sort of integrated your business into distribution as well?
It's not recent, actually. What's recent is the internal partition. So the businesses used to just run side by side as individual silos, and what we've done recently is just divide, put a kind of a buy partition down the middle of the business between the portfolio managing and the platform businesses. So it's a kind of an internal rationalization and labeling exercise, really.
Okay. So what are your take on the RDR in UK and the effects that we have seen? If we just jump into that.
So the experience has not been good of the Retail Distribution Review. I don't think that will take anyone by surprise. So we were a little alarmed to see that an inducement ban is one of the options that the European Commission is considering under the MiFID review. But I must say, and perhaps to jump back to the review, it is important to remember that there are many other options that are tabled in the consultation, some of which are basically just to make sure that the status quo is working as it should and is being supervised properly, and that ESMA is comfortable that all NCAs have the same definition of, for example, what an enhancement to the quality of distribution might mean. And there are other levers that policymakers or supervisors could look at, such as improving the way that distributors disclose what they are offering as a service to end customers. So inducements is in there. Sorry, a ban on inducements is in there, but we are hoping that it's something of a policy lever of last resort. Or actually, knowing how legislation is made, perhaps even a stalking horse that is in the negotiation in the hope that it can be given up in return for another provision that someone wants. And I guess, I'd also take comfort from comments that Commissioner Mairead McGuinness made recently. So at the Politico Finance Summit on the 11th of February, she's quoted as saying, "I'm not ruling out a ban, but I'm not there yet." So right at the top of the shop, I think there is context, and there is a kind of an appropriate treatment of an inducement ban, because there's concern about what it might do. But as you know, Frederick, the way that this debate has taken shape is there are a number of bodies out there who think that a commission ban is the only way to tidy up the advice practice. BEUC, or BEUC, the Pan-European consumer body, has long pushed for an inducement ban, and there are a number of reports they have out there outlining the conflicts that arise when commissions are paid. And then more immediately at the moment, Guillaume Pras' outfit, Better Finance, is a very strong advocate for a commission ban. So there are definitely two armies that are sort of engaged in a battle of intellect here, and the field that they are fighting on is indeed what experience have countries that have already had inducement bans had, and those are obviously the Netherlands and the UK.
Yeah. Can you see that, for instance, now UK have left the EU, but can you see that Netherlands or any other country are pushing for a ban in the council, the European Council? Is that a country division, or is it more like the interest groups that you have talked about?
I think it's very much a country division. From what I hear, the only strong supporters of a ban are the Dutch.
Okay.
He's like Paul Tang, very thoughtful guy, and of course in Holland they have a quite positive experience. The point is that these experiences are always very idiosyncratic, and what might work in the Netherlands might not work in other jurisdictions, especially if they have different distribution mixes. And the UK experience is one example where I would suggest it hasn't worked. But yes, on the political scene, the impression I get and the intelligence I hear is that there is a real head of steam against reaching for an inducement ban right now. And it's very much a Dutch point of view.
Okay. But what about the actual experiences then? If we should look at UK and the Netherlands, for example, as examples of a market where they introduced a ban on inducement, what can we see? What do you see are the effects on the business and the clients and customers and so on? How do you evaluate, or are there actually, first of all, is there a public evaluation of the RDR in the UK?
Yes, there is. So
okay.
FCA in December 2020 issued a paper called Evaluation of the Impact of the RDR. So I think that answers your question, Frederick. It does exactly what it says on the tin. It's quite statistical, and it's a little bit hesitant because the story it tells it is not one of a particularly healthy UK advice market. And then interestingly, it moves on pretty quickly to remedies for getting UK investors who are over invested or over saved in cash into investments. So we can come on to that perhaps in a minute or two.
Yeah.
That is we talk about an advice gap having developed in the UK post RDR. And actually what this FCA report effectively acknowledges is that there is one, because there are all of these people who have too much money in cash and who will be better off in investments, but clearly haven't made the jump because there is no advice supporting them. So the FCA report, is good and it's full of those statistics. But I think one of the telling points is that it jumps straight to a remedy for a problem, because that effectively acknowledges that there is one.
So, but this report, is that sort of the foundation for the debate in UK, or is that, or do you have other figures? Are there other conclusions and figures circulating in this debate?
So in the UK, yes, there've been lots of things written about the RDR and the impact it's had on the advice community. So there are a number of companies and bodies that track people coming into the advice industry and leaving it, and what it costs to be in there. And then actually, on the fund manufacturing side, what are the ongoing impacts for product provision, for product pricing, and for all of those things. So perhaps it is quite useful to run through some of those stats. I mean, at the moment, and this is from the FCA report, in the UK there are more than 5,000 advice firms. So our advice industry needs to be quite widely dispersed across independent financial advisors, or IFAs, rather than centralized in bank advice channels. Those 5,000 firms employ some 27,000 regulated individual advisors. The vast majority fee model continues to be offering a percentage of AUM, both upfront and as an ongoing service charge. 90% of advice is holistic, so that is obviously, you know, everything from financial planning and investments that you might want to make through to retirement planning and tax planning. But the average amount under advice is £150,000. So that's 5,000 advice firms advising people who've got are really quite affluent. And one of the trends that is tracked in the UK is consolidation. People keep on talking about these 5,000 firms dropping in number, and those 27,000 employees moving into more consolidated channels. But it doesn't seem to happen. We seem to be to continue with this. Sorry, my screen has just dimmed, and we're back again.
Yeah.
Yes, we seem to be continuing along the IFA line, and the consolidation that people talk about is not really happening.
I was just, a colleague of mine just told me how it works for her relatives or husband, boyfriend's relatives in the UK. But it seems like the service the IFAs are providing in UK is a bit different than we are used to in Sweden, at least, that you charge quite high fees, but the service seems quite excellent. They come to your house and sit down at the kitchen table and have the discussion and give you sort of a, as you say, the holistic advice on the total economy of the household.
No, that's absolutely right. It's close to sort of mass affluent wealth management.
Yeah.
It's a very bespoke experience. I mean, one result of the RDR is that those 27,000 advisors are very highly qualified. So the basic qualification in the UK now is the equivalent to an undergraduate degree. And they're very proud of that qualification, and a lot of them are overqualified. So it's certainly a very high quality industry. It's just that it is targeted at fewer and fewer parts of the general population. Perhaps saying something on that, actually, Frederick, the fact that in the same report that the FCA, where they set out that for those that get it, the quality advice is very good. And one of the stats here is 56% of consumers who received advice said that they were delighted with it. And the other statistic is how many people are taking advice. So the FCA report says that in 2017 there were 3.1 million Britons taking that type of financial advice. In 2019, when the report was cut, that had gone up to 4.1 million. So there are 4.1 million UK citizens receiving this very valuable and high quality investment advice on an average pot of 150,000 sterling. On the other hand, the FCA report identifies 8.2 million Britons who it thinks have got too much money saved in cash. And what they mean by that isn't entirely clear, but the assumption is that that this is discretionary cash over and above what you should have set aside in case the roof blows off your house with a small Eunice or Franklin, and that really would be better off in investment for your retirement, especially as inflation begins to take off, and you've got to look out for purchasing parity. So the FCA reckon that there are 8.2 million Britons who are in a place where they shouldn't be.
Are they drawing the conclusion that this is due to the RDR, or is that this sort of a macro circumstances that led to this um, cash-oriented households?
Yeah, so they don't draw that conclusion, and I think we do have to be wary of COVID. I think across all nations, there's been a kind of an increased amount of savings for those that can save because of the crisis. And of course, whereas of course other demographies have been really badly punished and had to spend much more than they've normally spent. So no, they don't ascribe this to the RDR, and neither will I. But the fact that it is in a report that is concluding the effects of the RDR is perhaps a bit of an implicit acknowledgement that that those 8.2 million people are in the place there because they have been denied advice. And of course, if you think about it logically, when advice was offered to you by your bank, the first thing they could see is when you had an over large cash balance. Yeah. You would have an advisor suggest you might want to put some of this in a fund or an ISA or a SIP, those personal pension products. And I was talking to my head of Canada yesterday, and she says that is precisely how the Canadian advice network operates, that you looking at your cash balance and helping you optimize your cash to investment ratio properly.
But if you look at the ban on inducements, where it has been introduced now in the Netherlands and also in the UK, can you draw the same conclusions, or does the implementation differ, or are the effects different, and why could that be the case, so to say?
No, absolutely. $1 million question. And I think starting with the customer experience, because that's where we should always begin, those are very different. And Dutch customers are in a different position to the UK ones. Going back into your question, I think the reason for that is that the bans are slightly different and that they were implemented differently. But also that they were implemented on advice models that were already very different and at different times. So I've only used the word different there to illustrate the fact that this idea that MiFID has, and that's debatable, as we mentioned earlier, cannot be a one size fits all. That when when in the experience of the Netherlands and the UK, the effect that inducement bans had were radically different, because there are so many different little parts of the ground on which the ban fell that they've had almost opposite results. So I was just going to say something about those differences, if that. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm sure there are people on the seminar who know more about the Dutch experience than I do. But, this came about during the global financial crisis. It was a voluntary ban that the Dutch government offered to the 5 main advising banks in return for financial assistance. Unsurprisingly, they volunteered. And the ban applied to so-called complex financial products, which included all investment funds. And what appears to have happened structurally is that of the customers who are taking, sorry, I should also say that the Dutch landscape was very much dominated by advice given through the 5 dominant banks. So it's a very concentrated distribution landscape, almost the exact opposite of the UK, where it was all, not all, but there was a big IFA industry alongside the bank advisors. So of those customers who were receiving advice from one of the 5 Dutch banks, it seems roughly that a third remained with their bank advisors post-ban and paid the advice fee and were happy to do that. A third of them dropped onto direct-to-customer online platforms, but also at the same banks. So they just moved from one channel to another one within their bank and started to pick their own funds. And a third became what we would call advice orphans. They just dropped out of investment altogether and took their cash and kept it on deposit or put it under the mattress.
So sorry, the last group were they sort of, they were leaving the fund investments at all? Yeah.
So that the last third neither took advice,
Okay.
paid for it, nor did they drop onto online platforms.
Mm.
I can't, one could guess at that demographic, obviously couldn't afford to pay for advice and perhaps weren't comfortable technologically to make an investment online either. And that third, or slightly less than a third, took their money out or didn't continue to invest. And in UK, thinking back at the way that the FCA is thinking about it, they're probably part of the contingent in Holland that have so much money on in cash and should actually be in investments.
But these direct platforms, are they they're charging a fee on directly to the clients?
Yes, they charged a platform fee.
Yeah.
But that's that's a flat. Sorry, my screen's just going down.
Yeah.
Very good security at Fidelity. If I don't for a period of time, my screensaver comes on. Yeah, so a flat platform fee, and then the cost of the fund that you purchase on top of that.
Yeah.
Whereas the advice model continued to be an agreed upfront percentage, both for the upfront advice and then the ongoing servicing. So
yeah, I got some questions from the audience as well. They're interested in the customer fees. How high are they? Could you say anything about the levels on the inducement and the fees for clients?
In the Dutch experience, no, I'm afraid not. I can go and do a little bit more digging and respond to that. I have a little bit more insight when it comes to where the RDR left consumers where they are today. But I'm afraid I don't have that data for the kind of the Dutch restructuring, so to speak.
Okay. But this seems like like the authorities in Netherlands have sort of, they reached their goals with their ban, so to say. Is that fair to say? Yes,
I think it is fair to say. I think they're conscious that there are, they did lose a third.
Yeah.
But I think that was back in 2013. I think many of those advice orphans who dropped out of either face-to-face or online self-direction 2013 have probably found their way back to platforms.
Okay.
Because let's remember, they are at the banks where deposits are kept. So I think really that it isn't really the way that the ban was managed in Holland, as much as the landscape it was applied to meant that and means that their experience has been largely positive.
But the reports I've seen from the Netherlands are also that the platform fees and also the advisory fees are very high, even though the fund fees are the lowest in Europe if you look at ESMA reports. But it's still, the cost of ownership is quite high if you go to, at least if you have the advisory channel.
Yeah, so I mean that rings a bell. That's certainly the case in the UK, where really at the end of the RDR, the total cost of ownership for a fund via the advice channel actually went up. The AMC went down because the advisors were taking a larger part of a larger pie. And that continues to be the case. I mean, as we mentioned earlier, you do get a very good quality service, but the financial dynamics post RDR, in a very rough kind of illustrative way, taking the example of an equity fund, pre RDR, a commission paying equity fund in the UK was about 150 bips. Post RDR, it was about 225. Of that, 75 bips would be the AMC, the fund manufacturer's charge. There would be roughly a 30 bip platform fee. The advisor fee would be 100 bips. So it's the advisor that is now taking the lion's share of that higher total cost of ownership. And then one of the interesting dynamics in the UK debate is VAT, value added tax, because you are now receiving advice that you pay for up front rather than bundled into the product. It became taxable in the UK. So there was another 20 bips added on to the advice fee to cover the cost of VAT. So yes, I mean, what you're saying, Frederick, is that if that's the experience in the Netherlands, it's absolutely reflected in the experience in the UK.
And would you say, you mentioned that the cost of, the net assets you need for receiving advice at all is about what, 150K?
Basically, yes. So in the FCA study, they discovered that the average size of advised assets across 4.1 million Britons is 150,000 sterling. There are other stats out there. In our experience, the minimum investable amount that you have before an IFA will consider talking to you in the UK varies from about 100 to about 300,000 sterling. And in the Netherlands, although this is slightly anecdotally, we're talking about 500,000 euros. So you've got to have a £500,000 pot before advisors will talk to you. And the reason, certainly the reason they're in the UK is the way that the RDR was rolled out. It completely changed the supply-demand dynamics around advice itself. So many advisors left the market that those that remained could be very choosy about which clients they took on.
But do you see any new entrants? I mean, we see the trends with robo-advising, and there's have been a lot of talk about that for 10 years. Are there any new entrants that are sort of addressing this kind of this population that is not paying for, that doesn't have 150K pounds?
Yes. So in terms of the advice industry itself, it seems to be in rude health, and there are graduates leaving universities who want to become IFAs in the UK. So that's quite a positive story. But the problem is, as you're suggesting, that all they will do is continue to service customers who are pretty affluent. And how do we reach those that aren't, including the FCA's own 8.2 million? How are we going to get those individuals investing in the first instance? And the big hope there is indeed technology. So in the UK, this is where the FCA has diverted its attention. And in that same report, the FCA set a target. They say that by 2025, they want to have moved 1.7 million of those 8.2, so that's 20%, They want to have moved 20% of those cash hoarders into investing. And the regulator itself is playing its part, but really it's doing it in a slightly in a reverse direction. So they want to move this money out of cash and into investment, but they are nervous that that people shouldn't rush to inappropriate or high risk investment, by which they mean meme stocks, Bitcoin. So the regulator is going to run a campaign to encourage people to invest and to sort of, I assume, we don't know yet, to explain what inflation does to cash and to motivate people to invest. But at the same time, it's going to run a campaign that says, be careful about what you invest in. So we've already got a slightly conflicted message.
Seems like they're giving some advice, actually.
Yeah, isn't that funny? And that's kind of, if you look at the fact that there are 4.1 million Britons who get advice, there are 8.2 million who need it. The FCA does indeed seem to be stepping in to give advice to the missing 4 million.
How many Britons are there actually?
How
many Britons are there actually?
You know what? I knew you'd ask that, and I should have looked it up before. I don't know, but these aren't, again, these aren't high numbers. Those 8.2 that the FCA identify are still the well off. They're the ones who've got DC pension schemes. They've got roughly 3 months mortgage payment or rent payment in a cash saving. So yes, there is now this challenge, and the UK industry is pulling together to try and figure out how to meet the FCA's target of 1.7 million. And the obvious answer is technology. And we've been talking about this for a long time, how counterintuitive it is that it's easier to buy a car online, or even get in debt yourself to a consumer credit setup, than it is to invest online. And the reason for that is not that we don't have the technology, we do. It's not that people are digitally unsavvy, they're not. It's regulation. It's that when you start to take someone on a customer journey towards an investment, it triggers investment advice requirements too early, which means we can't give personalized guidance or nudges without entering into an investment advice arrangement, which we don't think it is. And so that's one of the main points of conversation we have with our regulator, to get rid of regulatory barriers. The other ones are, of course, paper and ink. Too much of customer engagement across the EU, because it's in MiFID, and UCITS and AIFMD, presumes that you're going to be in the same room as someone giving you advice or distributing a product to you, and that pieces of paper are going to be passed across a desk. And the third key thing that we continue to press, both with the UK and with EU policymakers, and I'm speaking, as Fidelity now, is open finance and open banking. That once customer financial data is being exchanged between platforms using APIs, and we can help customers build up accurate pictures of what they've got and what they owe, so that their assets on one side, their liabilities on the other. Electronically, you can give them that kind of wealth management service by beginning with a holistic view of their total assets, and then model how that asset mix should change throughout their life, and then acting on it. So yeah.
The ones who are listening in here, most of them are, I guess, are really interested also on the business models. When you introduce a ban on inducements like in the UK, and 10 years after, what can you see on the business models? Can you see what are is it the same funds that are sold, or is it the same fund managers? Do you see vertical integration?
Yeah, so very good question. I mean, I think we talked earlier a little bit about the structural impact of the Dutch ban. I think of four sort of key impacts to business models and the structure of the market when thinking about the UK ban. So the first is what happened to those customers when advice moved from commission-based to fee-based. In Holland, remember, it was a third. In the UK, about a quarter of customers remained with the advisors that they were currently with and switched from commission to fee-based advice. And then about 3/4 of those who were receiving advice became advice orphans and just dropped out of the process. And there are a couple of reasons for that, really. One is where people were already getting advice from, and that in the UK was in the majority from high street IFAs and not from bank advisors. So where in the Netherlands you simply drop from the advice arm of your bank to the direct platform part of your bank, in the UK people dropped from the IFA just and disappeared. So we had a very different kind of customer experience of the commission ban in the UK. As I mentioned earlier, and this is to talk to your sort of business model point, the distribution ban in the UK also had a much bigger impact on the supply dynamic of advice itself. And one of the key things to remember here is that in the UK, the retail distribution review wasn't just about banning commission. The key part of it really was that RDR required investment advisors to re-qualify and to get this level of education that I mentioned earlier is equivalent to a degree. And that's not unreasonable. The mistake that I think a number of people point to is the fact that they didn't allow people to grandfather existing experience in. So if you were a 55-year-old IFA, you had to go and re-qualify. You had to go back to a university effectively. And that was enough to put a number of IFAs out of the industry. They thought, I can't be bothered with this. You're teaching an old dog old tricks. So I'm not happy with that. But more crucially, the banks couldn't afford to re-qualify their very large advice networks. So the banks completely pulled advice as an offering. I think you're on mute, Frederick.
I had an unstable connection. What about the fund managers? Have you seen consolidation? And is it? Can you see anything about the assets? Are they moving from active fund to index, or do you see anything like that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we talked a little bit earlier about how the pricing, the pricing model changed. There was obviously a product skew as well, because what the advisors did was put great pressure on the fund manufacturers to offer clean share classes and then super clean share classes. So there was an uptick in operating costs. Fund managers all of a sudden have to generate new share classes and manage them. For a transition period, we also had to operate legacy share classes and the new clean share classes, sometimes with the same customer. So up to the RDR, at the point that the RDR went live, you could keep your customer in the commission paying share class, but any new investment they made through the new advice structure had to be a clean share class. So we had numerous customers with all sorts of different share classes, despite the fact that they were invested in the same fund. And moving one to the other was quite complicated. And then, you know, at the fundamental level, the advisors really pushed down on asset management charges and demanded super clean share classes. And then, of course, they went to the cheapest available funds as well. And there was a big skew away from actively managed funds to low-cost index trackers and ETFs in the online world, because they obviously trade like shares and are easier to manage that way. So, and interestingly, of course, that is where Better Finance currently are in their thinking. They think that all you've got to do is get rid of face-to-face advice, put people on platforms, and they will just buy low-cost index trackers, and the job is done.
Just for the Swedish audience, I mentioned that Better Finance's Aktiespararna is one of the members of Better Finance in Europe, so we know what they are, so to say. Yeah, sorry.
Interesting. Yeah. So you know, in some ways, they the policy knocked out one conflict and brought another one in. A big skew towards index.
But Dan, may I ask you one question? When we look at the ESMA reports on fund fees in Europe, we can see that the Netherlands are really low. They're really low, and as you described it, yeah, you have platform fees or your advisory fees that sort of add up, and the total cost of ownership increases. And then actually Sweden are number 2. UK is a little bit further down on the list. Why is that? Why don't you have the same? You're talking about that the change to index funds, the advisory channel, but why have you not reached the same levels on fund fees as in the Netherlands or even in Sweden?
You know what? I don't know. I've seen the same statistics, and that's a very good question that I will take back to our distribution team. I'll grill Richard afterwards, perhaps, and our product team. Yes, I don't know the answer to that, and we are asked the same by policymakers who have this you know, this kind of slightly, I won't say simplistic, but yeah, kind of a structural model that they think should be very easy to achieve, and it's not. But I don't know if members are aware that talking about costs, there are a couple of reports out there at the moment that have been put together by KPMG that look at will there be cost savings if there were an EU inducement ban, which I'll make interesting reading. KPMG have put 2 reports together, and this is where I can't remember which are public and which not.
They're not. Sorry, they're not public. That's
okay. Yeah.
Yeah, but I know them. I read them. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, one focuses on Germany, and kind of answers the question: will consumers go onto robo advice platforms and buy ETFs? And looks at a number of behavioural points that suggests no, that the customers you want to reach aren't ready to do that, and the platforms you want to exist aren't there yet, and certainly not at the price points that they would need to be at to reach the consumers you need to reach. And the second one, which is put together for the French, Italian, and Spanish trade associations, basically concludes that active funds with commission are still very competitively priced. I think, you know, the range there goes from 1.93% in the Netherlands up to 2% in France, Italy, and Spain Frederick, you're saying that the Swedish industry is good, perhaps closer to the Dutch than to the UK, because we are at 2.5% plus VAT, because of course you have to pay VAT on the advice. So yes, so those reports are out there, and Better Finance again.
I'm not sure if it's mine or your connection that is a little bit unstable. Oh, it's mine. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I can hear you.
My connection is a little bit. Sorry, my connection is a little bit slow.
Yeah, no problem at all.
No, but I have actually a question from the audience talking about the fees imposed instead of the inducements. How are they actually charged? Are they charged by an invoice, or are they collected from the assets, so to say?
They're collected from the assets.
Okay.
So our experience of this on our the platform funds network that supports. Sorry, that's the wrong name. We've changed it recently. The platform that supports advisors advising clients. One of the services we offer is to make sure that advised customers have enough free cash on the platform to be able to pay upcoming advice charges. And sometimes when they don't, you have to prompt them to sell out a number of units in order to free up the cash to pay. But we try to give advance notice of when an advisor's bill is coming due, so that they can make decisions, and that doesn't have to happen. So yeah, I mean, getting the advisors paid from the customer's assets from the platform is a little bit of an operation, and something that we have to help customers with in order to keep them as clued in as possible.
Now time is coming to an end, but before we close for today, just what do you see coming out of this? What's your idealistic view, your structure of the market in the future? What do you hope for, and what do you see coming?
So I mean, we've touched on one at the moment, which earlier on, which is there are already advice gaps, even where there are good commission-based face-to-face advice networks, like in Germany and Sweden and Italy, for example. There are still people who need advice. And then in the UK, where we have a considerable advice gap, technology has to be come to the fore. And I won't repeat the points I made earlier, but the biggest barriers to online customer journeys are regulatory. So we really need to move the European Commission on when it comes to its retail investment strategy, its digital strategy, open finance, and MiFID and UCITS with their pieces of paper, and the assumption that advice is given across a table have to be dragged into the current century. They're wildly outdated. I think when it comes to the EU debate itself, I mean, we kicked off at the beginning of this seminar with Mairead McGuinness's circumspection around an inducement ban. I would be very surprised if this made it into final policy. And I think the reason for that is that there are so many other things that the Commission could do to improve advice and distribution before reaching for an inducement ban, which is effectively an atomic bomb. So, I mean, the Commission hasn't really investigated the market properly. So it's doing that, but we do need a proper study of how distribution works and how it's paid for and how it's disclosed and what consumers understand about it across different member states. I think that will prove that there is no such thing as a one-size-fits-all model, and that every country is different, and every citizen is different. I do think it's worth talking to the Commission about the dangers of vertical integration. So if you know you have an inducement ban and you effectively hand advice back to banks and destroy an open architecture environment, you've only got to read the Australian Royal Commission, which looked at the malpractice of bank advisors once they were given the entire market, to see that vertical integration is non-competitive in a very bad way. So I do think that, you know, some policymakers have this very tidy way of thinking. Give it to 5 or 6 dominant players and then we'll control them. Well, be careful, you know, what you wish for. That might not happen. And then, although I'm loath to say it, perhaps a stronger role for ESMA in bringing supervision of distribution up to scratch. You know, when you think about it, fund manufacturers have to produce documents that explain exactly what our products do, what they cost, what their risk profile is, and how they've performed and will perform. Distributors have no such document that they are obliged to give to a customer saying what service they're going to offer at what cost and when the money's going to be made. So, you know, something as simple as a key distribution document that mirrors a key product document would be a much better step than an inducement ban. But let's see. The time is now. So this is happening in real time.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I saw on your CV that your LinkedIn profile that you're studying a lot of psychodynamics. Is that helping you out following this legislative procedures in the EU?
Yeah, no, that's right. So yes, secretly on the side, I'm training as a psychoanalyst.
Yeah, okay.
So yeah. It does help. It helps me talk to myself at night,
all right.
and other colleagues. But yeah, I mean, you know, finance at the end of the day is people.
Yeah.
And you know, as we think about getting more people to save, all of those behavioural nudges and cues become more and more important. So yeah, but watch this space. I'm not qualified yet, Frederick. And why do you ask? Tell me about your father.
Yeah. No, I won't.
No.
So, but it seems that you can help the FSA with the getting all those Britons invested again. Yeah.
Well, let's see. I think I think the combination of technology and behavioral finance and how to nudge people into better decisions it's all ready to roll. As I said earlier, the barrier is the regulation won't allow us to deploy it properly. So yeah, interesting job.
Thank you very much for taking your time with us. It's always very interesting to get experiences from other markets, and you have a lot of experience, at least in the UK, and also Fidelity as a company that is covering a lot of markets within Europe. It's really useful for us up here in Sweden to listen in and get some knowledge of what's going on. And as you say, now it's the time. The Commission is working with the new legislation in this area, so therefore it's a debate that is resonating in the whole EU. So it will be very interesting to follow that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dan. As I said, we will have this recording somewhere, not in public, but somewhere, so we can provide you with links to it if you have colleagues that want to listen in later on. Dan, I would put is it okay if I put your contact details in that with a mail going out afterwards, and also maybe with some links of public reports that we can find on this area?
No, that would be great, as long as you put Richard's down as well. So
super. Yeah.
He can do the harder work.
Richard, you're mentioning is Richard Bentefor, is our guy at Fidelity in Sweden.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So yeah.
And Frederick and members, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, a nostalgic walk through the past for me, as well as a look into the present. So let's hope that the future is gives us what we need.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye. Bye.